Hey guys, good to be back. In this video, I'll be talking about long-term care in America and how we got here. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, my name is John Burbank and I work with the Lyman Group. We are a 51-year-old relationship-focused financial services firm located in Seattle, and we help successful professionals, families, and individuals find tax advantageous strategies that are not common to most people. So I'm happy to share these ideas with you, and I'm looking forward to sharing a new one with you today. So real quick, I would like to send a heartfelt just shout out to those down in the Panhandle region who've been adversely affected by Hurricane Michael. I spent many years of my life down there, and my parents actually live in the Panhandle region, so I got nothing but love for you guys. I know there's a long road ahead for you, and just know we're praying and thinking about you out there. So Q4 is around the corner, and people are winding up the year, really trying to boost revenues as they close out their books, and also looking towards strategies to take their earnings from their companies moving forward. So I'm excited to share another strategy with you today, and that strategy will be looking at how long-term care works in America. One thing before I get started, I will be monitoring the comment section live. So if you do have any questions, comments, maybe you have had a first-hand experience with long-term care in your family or with your friend group, please go ahead and share live. I'd love to interact with you during the broadcast and hear what you have to say. Emojis, likes, all those things are good as well. If you do have a friend who would benefit from this information, please go ahead and do the @ and then their name in the comment section. The whole purpose of these videos is to get this information to the public so they can make more informed decisions and just have a more healthier, structured financial situation. If you want to know more about what we do at the Lyman Group, please visit our webpage at thelymangroup.com. And lastly, if you are watching this video after the broadcast, we still do keep an eye on the comment section, so please go ahead and send a question or comment our way, and we'll make sure to follow up as well. All right, guys, so long-term care in America. It's been a problem for a while, and it's only going to get worse, and there's many reasons for that. So right now we have roughly 76 million baby boomers who are getting ready to reach retirement. And in truth, yesterday is when we should have started the long-term care conversation, but we're going to go ahead and start it today. So in America, the federal government does very little to help you and I with our long-term care needs, and they really leave us with only 3 options. The first option is you become poor enough to qualify for Medicaid. So how poor is poor enough? In 2017, the income thresholds to qualify for Medicaid were $2,205 a month, and for assets under management, the number is $2,000. So if you have more than $2,000 in your name, then you will not qualify for Medicaid. So really think about this for a second. Hypothetically, you or a loved one winds up needing long-term care coverage in an instant. You don't have a plan in place. And you have to sell things like a house, a car, artwork, jewelry, family heirlooms in order to draw down the assets under management below $2,000. Well, if your family member who has those assets under management is in long-term care, odds are they will not be able to sell a house, sell a car, sell jewelry. That's going to be the burden of their loved ones or their family members. Now, if it's an older person going into long-term care, odds are their family members are busy living their life. They probably have a family, a career, and their own things going on that take up all their attention. So if they're now responsible for selling your assets to fund your long-term care, odds are they're going to do their best, but they're not going to do it as well as they could if they had time and energy to do so. I've experienced this firsthand when my grandma went into long-term care. My parents had to sell her assets, and it was in a relative fire sale environment, so they did not realize the full value of a lot of the assets that they sold. So keep in mind, if you wind up in long-term care and you all of a sudden have to figure out how to get those assets below $2,000, it's going to create a lot of stress on your loved ones, and you'll be stuck with those bills, big bills, early on. And we'll look at that in this next topic. So, number 2, you're wealthy enough to self-fund your long-term care needs. It would be very nice if we all could do that. However, long-term care is very expensive in America. A Stanford study had the average nursing home estimated at $92,000 a year. That is a lot of money, guys. And so keep in mind, even if you can self-fund your own long-term care needs, it's more cost-effective to look at strategies like long-term care insurance instead of go dollar for dollar out of pocket. Lastly, the third option is you rely on a loved one or a family member to put an indefinite pause on their professional and personal life in order to take care of you. Now, again, my grandma went into long-term care and it was a big burden on our family. She was put on hospice originally. So what hospice means, for those who don't know, is that you essentially have 6 months to live. That's what the government is saying. Well, once my grandma went on hospice, she broke her hip, full disclosure, and then she went into a nursing home for rehab on that. Well, she actually lived 10 more years after she went into hospice. So at $92,000 a year for a nursing home, that's roughly $920,000, near $1 million worth of costs that we had no clue that were going to arise. And also keep in mind, the government had said she was going to die in 6 months. So my family, my dad owned his own business. He was responsible for 50 employees. You can imagine how busy he was and traveling to sell his products. My mom was a full-time employee and raising a family as well. So all of a sudden this burden of my grandma lands on their plate. And we're the type of people who don't leave our people behind. My mom, for example, spent 25 hours a week at my grandma's side in the nursing home. But before that, my parents had to take on the burden of selling my grandma's assets to get her below that $2,000 asset threshold to qualify for Medicaid. So imagine that. Full-time jobs, raising a family, the emotional strain on having to go through this, and then you have to figure out how to get your loved one to qualify just so you can see them through this process. Guys, firsthand, I'm telling you the truth. It is very exhausting to go through. So, America is a great nation, right? In many ways, we view ourselves as number one on the world stage. How in the world did America get here? I mean, we look north across the border to Canada. They laugh at us when we talk about our long-term care issue because they don't have this problem. So how did we get here? Well, in 1935, Congress created Social Security. In 1935, the average life expectancy was 61 years old. Today, the average life expectancy is 80 years old. That's 33% longer. So people are living 33% longer. They're requiring that much more from Social Security. The system was not designed for those lifespans. Secondly, in 1965, Congress created Medicare and Medicaid. Well, back in 1965, people were much more likely to die from illnesses like heart attacks than they are today because we've had a lot of medical advances since then. Well, it is phenomenal that we've had those medical advances. The systems designed prior to those medical advances have not kept up with them. So people, and again, this is not fun stuff to talk about, but people who used to die from issues like heart attacks are now living a lot longer and are much more dependent upon these entitlement programs in America. So another thing to consider is how old our population is today compared to how it was back in the day. So in the 1960s, America was relatively young. Roughly 10% of the American population was retirement age 65 or older. In 2040, that number will be 20%. So let's look at those three situations: Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, and retirement age booming. People are living longer, drawing more against Social Security than it was designed. People are overcoming health issues that were much more critical back in the 60s because of the technological advances that helped them live longer. So they're much more reliant on Medicare and Medicaid, and we have much more people going into retirement than we did back in the 60s. Not only that, America was structured different from a social perspective back in the 60s as well. So back in the 60s, roughly 25% of Americans had access to a fixed and stable pension plan. These pension plans essentially made sure that they were taken care of during retirement. Anybody who's kept up with business news over the past decade knows pensions are a thing of the past. Secondly, in the 1960s, women were expected to stay at home, raise the children, and take care of their aging loved ones free of cost. Now, I read an article recently that says that a stay-at-home parent leaves roughly $2 million worth of earned income potential on the table to stay at home and not have a career. Add in the savings that they experience from not sending a family member to a nursing home or assisted living environment, and these numbers are just astronomical, especially when you think about what the social environment is today, where roughly 40% of the households have a woman as the primary breadwinner. So not only has the woman now, gone into the workforce at a much higher rate, but the flip side is there's no guarantee that her partner has assumed what her old role was in the 60s. There's no guarantee of that. And so now you have that void as well. So all these things are really adding up to a catastrophic issue around long-term care in America. So as you can see, it's a big dilemma and we have a lot of work to do in order to solve it. According to Time magazine, the federal government today spends roughly 1.3% of GDP on long-term care funding. The analysis shows that by 2050, we'll be spending more than double that, roughly 3% of GDP in 2050. Excuse me. According to a 2016 by the Department of Health and Human Services, 48% of men and 57% of women will need long-term care funding at some point during their lives. 47% of men, 58% of women. Those are astronomical numbers, guys. And one thing to keep in mind is that there is long-term care insurance that's more cost-effective than self-funding and really can set you up for a much easier transition into long-term care if you need it at some point in time. Now, the current policies are relatively logical and flexible, and we'll get into that in another broadcast. And the old policies were designed in a very poor way. So access to the funding was very difficult to achieve, and the policies were really expensive due to alarming premium increases year over year. And we're going to get into that in another broadcast as well. But the point is that there is long-term care insurance, but only 10% of Americans are using long-term care insurance to fund their long-term care needs. Of the total spending on long-term care in America, only 4% is coming from long-term care insurance plans. 96% is coming from an entitlement program like Medicaid, or people self-funding, or people avoiding the cost by relying on a loved one or a family member to mitigate those costs and take care of them. 96% of people are living in that ecosystem. And guys, to be honest, I can't see how anybody would want that to be the desired outcome. It doesn't make any sense. So a Stanford study also highlighted how long people can be exposed to long-term care. The Stanford study said that 1 in 6 people need long-term care funding for 3 years or more. Again, the same study estimated the average cost for a nursing home to be $92,000 a year. That's $275,000 over 3 years. My grandma, firsthand experience, spent 10 years in a nursing home. These numbers are real. They're huge. And guys, one thing I'd like to add too is that the emotional stress is not even being qualified here. We're just quantifying economic stresses. The emotional burden on families, realizing this firsthand as they go through it, your family members or loved ones, instead of sitting down at the table and talking about it beforehand, it's like letting a big emotional issue that you had earlier on in your life just sit there and stew and boil, and you never deal with it. And then later on in life, it pops up and it erupts like a volcano because you never paid due diligence to that emotional issue that you had. Well, this is a perfect example of something that will be a very big emotional issue in most of our lives. Again, the estimates are 48% of men are going to need this, 57% of women at some point. So more than half of us are going to need this. More than half of us are going to have to deal with this. So I just really want you to think about, again, how big this problem is for all of us. All right, guys, I'd like to open up the floor to any comments, questions, concerns. If you do have a real life experience, I'd love to hear about it, because we just want to hear how people are experiencing this and try to offer some help. So to sum up how we got here, the social and economic systems that were in place in the 60s and Social Security in the 30s have not kept up with the evolution of our society. As we started to live longer, as health issues have gone from critical to acute, and how we've also had more people who are reliant upon these programs because more people are entering retirement as the baby boomers grow old, the systems really have not been updated to keep up with this. Just like you update your iPhone once a year, we're not updating Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid once a year, once a decade, once a generation. So it's a massive problem that we're all going to have to face, we're all paying into, and we all need to have this conversation. And the truth is, guys, in America, you are on your own when it comes to long-term care insurance. I don't like being the bearer of bad news here. This is not a fun topic to talk about, but it's real. I've experienced it firsthand. Statistically speaking, odds are you're going to experience this firsthand at some point, either firsthand, secondhand, or thirdhand. And I just really would challenge you to sit down with your loved ones and have an honest conversation about what the outcomes look like, about some of the decisions you want to make when this happens, and get ahead of this. I mean, this is an impending thing for a lot of us. We can't avoid our long-term care needs if we need them. So I really just challenge you guys to sit down and have the conversation and just hash out, what it's going to look like for you and your loved ones. All right, guys, I really thank you for taking the time and sitting down today to listen to this broadcast. Again, I know it's a very heavy topic and it's not fun for a lot of us to think about. It's very emotional for me personally, and I'm feeling it deep down just talking about it to you. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. And again, like I said, if you have any questions after the video as well, please let me know and I'll happily respond. All right, thanks a lot, guys. See you soon.